This is Speak Earth. I'm Case Bradford. Thank you for tuning in to this episode with Clint Ober. This episode blew my mind. Clint is nearing his 80th birthday. He's been campaigning, crusading for the power of earthing and grounding for 30 years now. He knows all about it and conveys the information in a way that just makes so much sense. His stories are deep and powerful. His wisdom is potent, and I deeply appreciate having had the opportunity to connect with him and co-create this podcast episode. I'd read his books, I'd watched his documentary over the years, and had my mind bloomed by this information. And it really does flower when you begin to put this information into practice. We discuss how our bodies are electrical first, chemical second, meaning everything is built on a foundation of electrical energy, which comes from lightning in the clouds. It strikes the earth, and we're able to access that energy by having our feet on the earth. Growing up as a cowboy in Montana, he saw his Native American friends always being free foot and saying, shoes will make you sick, do not wear shoes. They would even bury their sick in the ground to accelerate and support the healing process. I had my mind blown in this conversation. We dive deep into how in the 1960s, wearing plastic-soled shoes that insulated us from the electrical charge of the earth. A lot of sickness has stemmed from that. And it is our opportunity to be a part of creating a cooler world, looking for solutions, seeking solutions to reconnect with nature and recreate that harmony that's gone. We discuss this in the conversation, and I bring up one option, which is leather-soled shoes. Rizels are awesome. The brand Rizal shoes, I just went for a walk with them. They feel amazing. I love the feeling of the raw leather on my bare feet and my toes. It's a wonderful tactile experience. They're fashionable and they're functional. You're able to access the free electrons from the earth, which brings down inflammation and elevates vitality. You can get 10% off a pair of Rizals down below with the code CASE. Again, their site is RHIZAL.co. Link down below, rizal.co. Use the coupon code CASE, save yourself some cash, grab yourself a pair of some high tech. These are advanced technology. These shoes will allow you to access this healing force of nature known as earthing or grounding, free electrons from the earth to support the foundation of your immune system. Your health and wellness is electrical. Every cell uses electricity to communicate chemicals, and by earthing, by accessing the powerful electric current of Mother Nature, being free foot on the earth as often as possible, or wearing earthing shoes like Rizals will do tremendous amount to support your vitality. And this is a grassroots movement, literally. It's all about the grassroots. We're sharing this. It's a free technology, and we're not going to see this on the front page of the news for that reason. So it's our responsibility to tap in, to access this healing energy and to share it with our loved ones. It could be in person while you're wearing a pair of Rizals. It could be free foot at the park, or you could share this podcast with everybody you know. So that's it for me. I'm stoked on this one. I'm charged up, and hopefully I didn't go on too long with this preamble. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this episode with Clint Ober. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you. It's an honor to be connected with you and to co-create this podcast conversation. Your work has had a tremendous impact on my life through raising my awareness of the healing power of earthing and grounding. So I'd like to start by just saying thank you for the work that you've done and that you continue to do. It's been an immensely powerful force in my life, and I'm sure for many others.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, I appreciate you having me on on your show and being able to share a little bit about what we're doing with your people. You bet.
Absolutely. And from what I understand, this has been a 3-decade, like at least a 30-year long mission for you. You've been on this path, sharing the power of grounding.
Yeah, it really focused the last 25 years for sure. It's been a long journey. I started out asking a question and thought I could answer it in a few days or a few weeks, and here I am still working on it 25 years later. Yes.
Do you ever
Yeah.
Do you ever get tired of talking about it? Are you just waiting for everyone to wake up already? Like, everyone, just take your shoes off already. This thing is pretty proven.
Well, it's when I first started, you'd go down to the beach, down Carlsbad or wherever, San Diego, and you'd go for a nice long walk on the beach. And the majority of the people were walking in tennis shoes on the beach. And today, 25 years later, you hardly find anybody on the beach with wearing shoes. So it's a little bit of a sign because, I started down in San Diego area, Carlsbad and so on. And so it's a little bit of a sign that we've made some progress. But, today, everybody, the first thing they do when they get up in the morning is they put their shoes on. And it's part of our culture. It's part of our lifestyle, the way we are. And and for people who, were born after 1960, well, shoes is the mantra. And then the styles, the colors, and they're kind of an ego thing, an identity. They're just a big part of our culture. And so for people not to wear shoes or to go barefoot, there's something wrong, But that's all changing. And but yeah, I don't know if I'm waiting for people to wake up. I really didn't have anything else to do for the last 25 years that was more interesting. So I just keep walking and talking, and we've grounded many, many millions of people, and it's all pretty much word of mouth. We can't go advertise and say, get grounded, because it just doesn't work that way. But anyhow, yeah, it's just kind of a mission and a lifestyle for me, and I live and breathe, educating and talking about earthing, and it's very important what it does for people, and you can't not do it once you understand the impact that it has on people, especially moms and children. And anytime you can improve the life of a mom, that's important, because she's the center of almost everything, And so that's where we focus mostly, is taking care of moms who are taking care of their moms. Absolutely. And their children, of course, and their husbands when they'll let them.
Awesome. And even that term barefoot is a funny one, right? Because it almost implies that something is missing from the foot, like, oh, it's bare. It's it's not having anything on it. I love to describe it as free foot. Like the foot is free from any sort of shoe or sock. I'm just out here free foot, kind of enjoying the land.
Freedom, yeah. It's freedom is a good way to say it. Just barefoot. I'm an old cowboy, so everything is, horses they're either barefoot or they're shod, and so it's just a term that goes with my age, I guess.
Yeah, it's a funny one. Even there's a lot of the terminology around grounding and earthing is so interesting, because once you start getting to the negative ions from the earth, which is generated from the lightning hitting, our planet, right. And then that comes into it can get sort of technical and complex, right? Like once you get into the explanation of it.
Well, it can be, and we can certainly go there. The primary thing, or the most simplistic way to look at it, is, the earth is a battery or a capacitor that's charged by the sun. The sun is spewing electrons and photons, and they hit the earth. And in fact, this weekend we had a major aurora borealis, and that's all electrons coming down and through the magnetic field and hitting and being deposited on the earth. And so the earth maintains a surface charge. I mean, it's always there. It goes up and down a little bit and does, moves around, but it's really, it's constant. Let's put it that way. It's, so the earth is electrical, and the earth is infinitely large relative to the body, and the human body being infinitely small. So when you put your bare foot on the earth, and your skin is conductive, that means that the electrical surface charge of the earth will flow into your body, or your body will instantly absorb sufficient electrons from the earth that it maintains the same pro rata electrical potential as the earth itself. So the most significant thing about being grounded, you kind of have to think, we ground our outlets, we ground the chassis of all of our major appliances. We do that to prevent fire, to prevent overloads, for a lot of reasons, but primarily to maintain the electrical stability of the grid and all things electrical in our homes and in living environment. And but what that grounding is about is in every home you have a rod that's driven into the earth, and it's earthing. I mean, it's an earthing rod, and so then you connect a wire to it and run it into the electrical system, and then you run it throughout the electrical system of the home, and on every outlet there's a third prong, that round hole is connected to that ground. Then when you plug in a refrigerator or a computer that has a ground, then that ground port is connected to the chassis, to the metal housing of the refrigerator or the wash machine or the computer or whatever. And so that if for any reason there's an electrical event or a short, then electrons can immediately come from the earth to reduce that charge and trip a breaker. So it's all about fire and prevention and electrical safety and all of these things. But the main thing is to ground something is to reduce the potential of an electrical event, and that electrical event is primarily fire.
Absolutely. And then when we make the corollary to our bodies, we've got inflammation, which would be that fire within our own cells that we're trying to sort of bring down by being grounded, by being
Yeah.
connected to the earth.
When I started this 25 years ago, I would say not 1 in 1,000 people looked at their body as being electrical. I'm not electrical, I'm chemical, I'm vitamin C, I'm this, I'm that, I'm all these things. And but nobody looked at their body. But now today, everything in the body is electrical first. Every single cell in the body, how it takes in food and eliminates waste or debris from the cell is through an electrical process, polarization and repolarization, where it's taking swapping the electrical surface charge on the cell from the inside to the outside, and so on and so on. It's a little technical, but basically everything, every single cell, every single transaction in the body, whether it's a cell communicating with its neighbor, or if it's a liver cell connecting with the rest of the liver, or the body, they all are transceivers, meaning they can transmit information, they can receive information. And to put it simply, the way they pronounce you dead is there's no electrical activity left in your brain. That's when they pronounce you dead. But before that, everything, every single cell, every thought, everything in your body starts with an electrical impulse or an electrical prompt, and then that changes or promotes, chemical responses, hormonal, or the body creates lots of minerals, and I mean not minerals, but non-electrical things, like hormones and all these things. But again, they're all fundamentally, everything is electrical. Your body's electrical first, chemical second. It takes in a movement of an electron to change anything chemical, and so it's really quite simple, but we've never been taught to look at it that way. And it's even the word inflammation, meaning inflame, on fire. That's a word that surfaced around 2004, just 20 years ago. And before then, now today, everything is about inflammation. All the health disorders. Now they know that most modern health disorders are inflammation related. And that's what we can get into in our discussion here. And but that's what I spent the last 25 years or more working on, is trying to understand how grounding affects the body, how grounding, and nobody knew. I didn't know. Nobody knew. But the main thing is, you kind of have to go back to 1960, and back then, the first thing, we invented plastics in the late 50s, early 60s. The first thing we did is put plastic on the soles of our shoes, and then we carpeted our homes with synthetic fibers, synthetic carpets, all that kind of stuff. And so we began to insulate ourselves from the earth. And before, when I was a kid, I was born in 1944, but when I was a kid, we were barefoot most of the time. The only time we put on shoes is when we were working in the field, or we were going to school or a church wedding or something, some event. Other than that, we'd lose the shoes, and and we felt good, because you have all that energy and so on. But but if it were to rain or anything, if you had leather shoes on, and if it were to rain, you had to take them off and carry them, because they would get all gnarly, and when they dry out, you couldn't get them back on your foot. But anyhow, when you were wearing a leather-soled shoe, it's what we call semi-conductive, meaning that your body perspires and the body salts are, so the soles of your shoes would absorb all of that perspiration and the body salts, and the shoe becomes electrically conductive. So it's kind of like similar to being barefoot. And so back then, everybody was naturally grounded. We touched the earth, we grew things from the earth, we harvested things, we raised things. We were forever in touch with the earth indirectly. We didn't know anything about it. It was there. That's who we are. We run around on the earth. But anyhow, in the 1960s, that changed. And once we started wearing those synthetic shoes, it's like, even back then, they had tar and paper that they wrapped around electrical wires, because they didn't have the plastics and so on. And so a lot has changed, but anyhow, plastic is an insulator, meaning you can wrap plastic around a copper wire and hold it, and you're protected from a shock or an electrical event. So putting a shoe on your foot, you're insulated, and now the body can't absorb ground, can't absorb the negative charge of the earth, can't. We lost our ground in the beginning in the 60s. Television came along in the 50s, and in the 60s, everybody was watching sitcoms and serials, and spending more time indoor watching the tube. And then today, came all the video and stuff, and then came the cell phone. And so today we all kind of live, distracted. We don't think about much until we get in trouble or our health gets compromised. But anyhow, so the main thing is 1960, about that era. That's when we lost our ground. That's when we lost physical contact with the electrical service charge of the earth. And after that, our bodies changed, because we didn't know then that, we live and breathe with the earth. We breathe oxygen. We don't think about it. We don't see it. We can't smell it, but it's there. We take it for granted. All throughout evolution, people didn't know they, had to have oxygen. It was just there. and, and it's kind of the way ground. Nobody knew that ground had an effect on the body. Nobody realized until it was 30 years ago when we started doing this research. That was, I can't believe it's been that long ago, but anyhow, 1960 to 2000, that's 40 years. We'd only been wearing shoes and doing all this stuff for 40 years. When we started this research, now it's pushing 23. So it is pretty amazing. But anyhow, so this is a new phenomenon. It's kind of happened overnight, but we were distracted. As human beings, we were distracted. Normally, we feel things. When I was a kid, we would go out and spend a lot of time in the wild, and you had this. We have a lot of automatic responses. Like when we go into the woods, if there's a bear in the woods, sometimes you could feel your hair stand up. You couldn't see the bear, you couldn't smell him or anything. You couldn't hear him, but you could feel there was something in the area that caused the hair on your arms to stand up. So you were sensitive to everything in the environment. Because back in those days, we didn't have all this electrical stuff. We didn't have a lot of noise. Everything was kind of quiet, especially in Montana where I grew up. You could go for miles and not see a telephone pole. But anyhow, so we used to have a sense where we sensed everything electrical in our environment, most especially other people and other animals. And and we've lost that because today there is so much electrical noise in our environment. Our sympathetic nervous system, or our fight or flight, is what that is. We're what do I want to say? We're living in a chronically elevated sympathetic state, meaning our body is sensing all this noise in the environment, and it's just overwhelms. Where before we would respond to a lot of these things, and today we can't because it's just too much noise. We can't sort it out, and the body gets every time your fight or flight system is built in. It's normal. It's natural. But anytime there's an event or noise or anything in the environment, the sympathetic nervous system will cause to produce a little bit of hormone cortisol spike. It'll release cortisol, and this cortisol builds up in our bodies, and it's natural. And every time you get in contact with a person, if there's any threat or if there's any anger, if there's anything going on, it elevates cortisol. And then in the old days, it wasn't a problem because we would stand on the earth and that cortisol response would flare up, and then but when you're grounded, it grounds it. I can tell a short story if we get time here. When I was a kid growing up in Montana, I was a cowboy. That's a boy who sits on a horse and runs around and rides around the pasture and just looking at cows and making sure that they're healthy. And if one is not healthy, you take it out of the herd and put it in a holding pen, and then you ride the pasture and you start checking it out, find out what's going on in the pasture, noxious weeds or the water is tainted or grass is too short. There's something wrong in the pasture that made that cow sick. So your job is to protect the herd and keep the pasture clean and pristine, so you have a healthy crop, healthy cows, so that you can make a living. Because if one of them gets sick or the herd gets sick, then you have to call the vet, call the bank, say, you guys own this, we're out of here, because there's no way you can make a living. So, but anyhow, lots of times when we were out there, you'd be sitting on a horse, and some years there were infestations of jackrabbits. And this is relevant to our inflammation. Uh, and there would be everywhere. At night, you could shine a flashlight and you could see, it looked like water out there. There were so many, the reflections coming back from their eyes. And, but anyhow, when you're sitting around on a horse babysitting cattle, and then so you entertainment, you're looking for entertainment. So here's a coyote sneaking up on a jackrabbit. The coyotes live on jackrabbits. The jackrabbits live on grass. If there's lots of grass, you have this chain going on. But anyhow, so the rabbit's sitting there constantly eating grass. That's all they do. And they just eat grass, nothing else. And then the coyote, they sneak up, they eat rabbits. So the coyote sneaking up, and then all of a sudden the rabbit senses the coyote, and then fight or flight kicks in, adrenaline kick comes up, cortisol, the body's filled with cortisol, and so the rabbit can instantly heighten awareness and alertness, but it can spring into the air, it'll jump 10 feet, and then it starts running zigzag back and forth across the pasture, and it does that so it can keep one eye on the coyote. And then the coyote is more like a dog. It's just doggedly running after him. And most of the time, the coyote runs out of energy. And the rabbit will run just a little bit further because in nature, we have conservation of energy. They do not waste energy. So he maintains a safe distance, but he keeps his eye on the coyote. But all the time, he's in this heightened state, charged with cortisol because he's just had his life threatened. And so anyhow, all of a sudden, the coyote will wander off a different direction. The rabbit will sit there, and you can kind of see them sometimes. They're shaking because they're very alert. And then all of a sudden, they'll have this big visceral shake. Then they'll go back to eating grass like nothing ever happened. And now that we've done all of our research, we kind of know that the rabbit, what they've done is during the chase, the body gets full of cortisol. Let's say you go out and exercise, or you go out and do yoga, or you go out and just work out. So you're going to create a lot of inflammation in your body. Well, anytime an animal is being chased, their body is filled with cortisol, filled with inflammation as a result. So when you stand barefoot on the earth, or when the rabbit's standing barefoot on the earth, what happens is they release that cortisol. And when it's gone, then the rabbit can go back to eating grass like nothing ever happened. Where humans, they need psychotherapy and they need to go to the emergency room, they need to whatever after the chase. So that's all part of this. We've lost our ground and we need to absorb those free electrons from the earth to reduce the charge and the inflammation that was created in the body during the chase, or and I tell that story primarily for women because they get up in the morning and they've been sleeping on a foam bed. They've got carpet on the floor generally. They're not grounded. And first thing they do is try to get the husband off to work or whatever. And so there's kind of push and pull all the time. Well, that's elevating cortisol, little squirts of cortisol. The kids get up and they've got all these little challenges. They've got to, whatever. So the mom is sitting there just constantly trying to manage all this. And there's tension. And anytime there's tension, there's cortisol. And so what happens then, she gets the husband off, she gets the kids off, whatever. Then she's got to get herself off in all too many cases. And so she gets ready and whatever. And again, she's using hair dryers, doing whatever, static electricity everywhere, and put shoes on, feed yourself a little bit, go to the car, sit in a car. It's lots of static electricity. Start driving down the road, then there's road rage and all of that tension, and so all of these little events are causing cortisol to become elevated, and they're all creating inflammation. If you don't release it, if you don't ground out this cortisol, so then she goes to work, does her, got the boss, got employees or customers or whatever. That's enough to raise anybody's cortisol, and then has to come home and take care of the family and be the center feeding the kids and everything that goes on. And then at the end of the day, she's totally beat, like a train wreck almost. So anyhow, the reason I tell that story is at the end of the day, no matter what happens, you're being chased by coyotes everywhere you go all day long, from your kids, your husband, everybody. Look at everything as the world's full of coyotes, and they're all nipping at you. And every time one nips, I mean, your cortisol goes up. And if you don't ground out that cortisol, then it's going to start out creating anxiety, irritability, tension, and oftentimes and especially in women, depression. Women they have 50% more pain receptors than men do. So they sense pain. They sense everything in their environment more than men do. Men I don't know why that is. I think it's probably because of raising children and nature's way of, because they think out here, men think inside here. And, but anyhow, so women are much more sensitive. And so they're the ones who have primarily the majority of the inflammation-related health disorders. So, but anyhow, I hope that story makes sense. But it's really to help women realize that if you can't do anything else, at the end of the day, take 30 minutes if you can. Go outdoors, get a chair, just sit down, take your shoes off, put your bare feet on the earth, and drain the coyote juice. Get it out of your system. Then you're going to start breathing easier. Your circulation is going to improve. You're going to feel better. The tension's going to come down. And when you get in bed, you can sleep better. And then wake up in the morning feeling a little better than you would if you were charged all night with that cortisol.
Absolutely. That's a tremendous story and such a useful one, because there are so many people living out that exact scenario. And just as you described, we've lost our connection with that electricity, which really is our immune system in a big way. Everyone looks for chemicals first. They'll look for something like vitamin C to enhance their immune system.
Right.
When in reality, if they were to think, as you're describing, electricity first, then we're stepping on the earth. We're allowing our body to release that charged up cortisol. And leather shoes, a great technology. I know moccasins have been around 14,000 years, as you described in your wonderful book about earthing called Earthing. And this is a way for us to get vitamin G, like you described. This, we get vitamin D from the sun, vitamin G from the earth. I know there's a leather shoe company called Rizal Shoes is a good example of one that offers ways where you can still get electricity from the earth, even on concrete, because that's a conductive material as well. Something amazing you describe where this is water and minerals that's still conductive, concrete, grass, the beach sand. So there are ways for us to access this amazing power of Mother Earth. And I'm curious how, if you think way back to your cowboy days when you kind of first had a observation of this, was this interacting with Native American culture? Were you observing the way that they were approaching Mother Earth and sort of bringing that to the rest of the people who had lost that connection?
Well, I grew up, some of my best friends when I was young were Native Americans. And I remember I was up around Montana. And, when I was a kid, I was, there weren't a lot of people, where I was. Anyhow, so we played cowboy and Indian. I was Custer. I've been killed 100 times, Custer's last stand, because Custer Battlefield was right there. And, but anyhow, when I was young, the Native Americans, they look at the world differently than, Anglo, and primarily. But anyhow, they're more in tune with nature. They live more in harmony back then. Anyway, they were more in harmony with the natural ways, and they look at themselves as a part of the earth, or as just part of life. It isn't about, you are no different than the animals or a blade of grass, or everything living is your cousin, and we're all a part of this together. So they look at things much differently, and I was always intrigued with the fact that they didn't really. I don't know if they understood it, but they didn't understand. I think they understood, but I'm not saying this right. But but they didn't understand how you could own a tree or own land or own property because it belongs to everybody. You know, it's the earth. You know, and on the other hand, Anglos they own everything. You know, and their whole mission in life is to um, you know, cut down the trees and put up a strip mall and go make money. It's all about, you know, whatever. And I understand it's our culture and it's our society and it's the way we live. But anyhow, they're totally different and they didn't mix well in the early days. And that's what caused most of the problems. But anyhow, so I in growing up with them, you know, I'm more inside of me. There, you know, the nature thing. Um, that speaks to me is I probably got more of that from them than I did anyone because I look at things, I feel comfortable looking at things the way they taught to look at life, as we're, you know, just we're a piece and a part of all this. It wasn't made just for us. You know, the animals weren't made just so we could go eat them. um, it's to live in harmony with all of that. And there's nothing wrong with it. You know, I'm not saying don't eat animals or whatever. I'm just saying that there's a harmony out there that we have. It's just gone now. It's just totally gone. Everything's manufactured and artificially cultured and so on. But anyhow, so uh, there's they're more what I would call nature people. They're more uh, natural. They take into consideration everything in their environment, um, and so it's just they're totally different. But yes, I did learn a lot from them, but I didn't make sense of any of it until I was much older. But a couple of things that I often refer to is, um, you know, one time there was I went home and back in the early 50s and that time, you know, a lot of people still lived in teepees. And even the government came in the 50s and built homes and gave them homes, but they still had teepees in the backyard, and they would sleep in the teepee and put the horses in the house where so they could drink out of the bathtub. It was kind of strange, but anyhow, that's all gone now. But but yeah, it's just a whole different world, and but one time I went into one of the teepees, and one of the moms said, you know, we'd come home from school, and she said, take those shoes off, get those shoes off, they'll make you sick. Wouldn't have had a clue what that meant back then, and I thought it was rather odd. But anyhow, that was just normal. And then one day there was um, a little girl that was the brother or sister of one of my friends, and she was probably 8 or 9. I don't even remember. Very young, and even younger than that, maybe. Um, anyhow, she had contracted scarlet fever, and they had taken her to the doctors and whatever, and there wasn't a lot they could do for scarlet fever back in those days. And it was, you know, kind of a plague like all the others. But anyhow, so they brought her home, and one of the elders dug a little pit in the ground, and it was only like, I don't know for sure, but I was smaller than, but it was like 6-12 inches in the ground. They put a little bit of straw in it, and then they put the girl in the ground, and then they built a fire not too far or pretty close. And then a couple of the elders or the older Indians, they just sat there with her and day and night, and they didn't know whether she was going to live or not, I don't think. And anyhow, 3 or 4 days later, we came home from school one day, and she was up running around like everybody else. And so it wasn't uncommon. I mean, it was uncommon to me to see something like that. But on the other hand, now that we've written the book and done all these things we've done, this is common in almost all indigenous cultures, burying people in the earth that are sick, and the earth heals them. You know, it's grounding. So what we're talking about with grounding, it's ancient. It isn't new. It's just something we forgot, and we weren't aware ourselves. that it had an impact. But anyhow, the main thing that is important it took us, I think I started in 97, 98, and it was around 208, somewhere in there, that we had discovered that you can ground people and pain would go away. Like if you had chronic inflammation like flaring arthritis, or you could put an electrode patch in the palm of the hand and connect it to a ground wire and connect it to the earth or to an electrical ground. And then within 5-10 minutes, the pain would pretty much go away. Now I'm talking about the flaring pain, that hot burning pain. And whether even a cut or even a sore, anything that's that hot burning pain, what we call the Vicodin pain, you would just put a patch on them and it grounds, and the pain just automatically drops. And so we knew the grounding reduced pain, but we didn't know the mechanism. We did not understand back then what was the mechanism of action. Why all the researchers, all the doctors, everybody said, well, what's the mechanism of action? What's causing it? And nobody knew. Absolutely no one knew. And it was around 206 or somewhere in there that I met a doctor. Well, I met him earlier than that. It was Dr. Steven Sinatra. He was a cardiologist. And we had done one of our first studies. And he came to town and was at a convention. And we had the results for a study that we did measuring heart rate variability and pain. And so we met with him and we told him what we were doing. And he said, Clint, he said, if you're affecting pain, you need to be researching inflammation. Well, inflammation wasn't really in the language, except for in the research community. And so we didn't understand what that meant, because inflammation to us was you sprain an ankle and it balloons up and you get sore and lots of pain and whatever. And then the swelling goes down in a few days. He said, no, that's not what we're talking about. He says, what we're talking about is chronic, inflammation, meaning a slow burning fire, oxidation. And it wasn't until 2004, I think, when Time magazine published an article that was produced by Ritger and the boys back at Boston, Mass., where they said that, you don't have all these modern health disorders. You don't have cancer and heart cardiovascular disease and, just this 100 top health disorders that we all describe ourselves by. He said, what you have is chronic inflammation, a slow burning fire in the body. And as time goes on, it oxidizes this fire, what we call inflammation, oxidizes tissue in the body. And then the immune system spends all of its time trying to repair that and put the fire out. And then eventually the immune system becomes so compromised that it can't maintain health. And then cardiovascular disease will manifest, or cancer will manifest, or in some cases, even autism is an inflammation-related health disorder. There's diabetes. All of these are inflammation-related. And so the key to it and the big chase was, well, what is causing inflammation? Because if inflammation is, according to Stephen, if inflammation is, you can't have pain, or you don't recognize pain unless you have inflammation. Pain is a byproduct of having inflammation in your body. So, and then we knew, the only thing we knew is that you ground the body and pain stops. So what we were doing is we were reducing inflammation, but how were we doing it? So in the research, one day I was working on, how the immune system works and how white blood cells, the immune system is primarily made up of white blood cells. So if you have a pathogen or a damaged cell in your body, the immune system produces what they call a neutrophil, which is a white blood cell. And how it does this and how it knows what it's doing is a mystery to me. But anyhow, it'll tell the little neutrophil, it'll swim over, find the pathogen, and it's kind of a jelly type cell, and it'll wrap itself around the pathogen, and then it releases what we call reactive oxygen species, ROS. And as soon as I read the word reactive, then I recognized that, wait a minute, this is an electrical phenomena, because reactive means it's got enough electrical charge that it can rip an electron from the structure of an object. It's like rust or oxidation, So, but it can rip an electron away, and so that's how the immune system reduces radicals or reactive oxygen species. It can go in there and oxidize, a pathogen. It just goes in and this, like an acid, it just oxidizes and eats up or rips the electrons away. But that's how the immune system disposes of pathogens. Now, so the question becomes, well, okay, that's normal. That's a normal process. Happens every moment, every second that you're alive. Your immune system is reducing radicals and pathogens and damaged cells and all these things that are going on constantly in the body. So it's a very normal process. It's called the oxidative burst. And but the problem was, okay, if we're reducing this pain and this inflammation, and the pain and the inflammation is coming from, where is it coming from? So what we eventually learned was that if there's an excess reactive oxygen species, any of these molecules are left after the oxidative burst, and they leak into the surrounding area, then they will, within nanoseconds, 3 or 4 nanoseconds, they'll rip an electron from a healthy cell and damage it. And then another message goes back to the immune system. Something's still here, sends another neutrophil. The neutrophil goes in, tries to clean up that situation, and sometimes it destroys the cell. And in the process, you end up with some remaining radicals and remaining reactive oxygen, and it will go and rip the electron from another cell. So you kind of started a fire, like burning a log, oxidizing a log, and so you set up this chain reaction. And so what's causing the immune system not to unwind, the oxidative burst not to unwind like it normally would? That's when we recognize that wearing rubber-soled shoes, we lost our ground. If you ground the body to the earth, then this inflammation and pain disappears. So what happens is when you put your feet on the earth, then your body absorbs these electrons, and it's sufficient so it has the same amount of electrons per rad as the earth itself on the surface. And now you are what you call negatively charged. You are grounded. Well, the reason we ground everything electrical on Earth is to prevent charge and prevent fire. Well, so when we lost our ground as humans, then we lost that protection, because before the body would always maintain a reservoir of free electrons that could instantly reduce remaining reactive oxygen and prevent it from damaging healthy cells. So the cause of chronic inflammation, they started in the 1960s, and then it built as everybody started wearing rubber-soled shoes. And now most everybody suffers from an inflammation-related health disorder. And it's all because we lost our ground. We lost our electrical protection. So now the immune system is doing what it knows to do. It can't do anything except what it knows to do. That's to reduce pathogens and damaged cells. So it's firing away, doing everything it's doing. But on the other hand, the excess radicals are not being grounded or not being reduced. And so they're creating damage. So the immune system is now redirecting all of its energy and effort to trying to put out the fire that it itself is creating, because it's no longer grounded, or the immune system doesn't recognize that the body's not grounded anymore. So But anyhow, so that's the inflammation loop, or the chain reaction that's causing this. So what grounding does is when you put your foot on the earth, your body rather instantly starts to absorb these electrons. And as you equalize with the earth, then it puts out the fire. You cannot have inflammation in a grounded object. You can't have a fire in a grounded, motor or anything that's electrically grounded. And now everybody said, well, that's wonderful. I'll go touch the earth. And they go put their foot on the earth and say, okay, I got grounded. Then they come back in the house. Well, you're no longer grounded. The inflammation is going to come back. So the problem here, there's a real dilemma here, because we're not going to go back and live on the earth. We're not going to go tear up the asphalt and the concrete. Concrete's actually ground. But we're not going to move outdoors. We're not going to tear down our house and get a teepee. So the challenge here is, first of all, 60 years ago, we created a problem. We started insulating ourselves from the earth. Today, everybody's suffering from inflammation and inflammation-related health disorders. And now we have evidence that we have to restore our natural ground. The body has to maintain some ground in order for it to prevent the immune system from oxidizing, from eating the body up. So it's so simple, but it's a little challenging to explain. But so now the mission is, when we were doing our studies, we've produced, I don't know, there's 30, 40 studies now. But as we were doing our studies in the early days, and so we had to make ground planes, something we could have people sit on, stand on, lay on, or patch them or whatever, just so then we could connect them to the earth, and so they would be grounded, so we can do biofeedback measurements or blood measurements or just whatever we were doing the research on. And as time went on, everybody that participated in the studies, the people who ended up being not the controls, but the real grounded people, they all wanted to keep the whatever we were using on them, because their pain would go away. And so we ended up started giving things away, and when we had excess stuff, then they started coming back and wanting it for their moms and for their, especially for their moms, and then for other family members and so on. And so eventually it just became, we accidentally created a business of creating these little ground planes. They're carbon mats that are conductive, that you can connect to a ground and then lay down on them. And when you lay down, it's like laying outdoors in the dirt. And that's really good for sleeping, because you don't have to do anything. You just lay down and go to sleep. And the earth does the work. And recovers. You recover. The immune system has not fighting inflammation. Now it's cleaning up inflammation and healing and so on.
Beautiful story and way of describing how our immune system works in concert, in harmony with the electrical energy of the earth, which is really generated by lightning in the clouds, like this mysterious force happening all the time, all around us. And we've disconnected from the plastic, really, just in the 60s, this strange new material that everyone got obsessed with, and all of a sudden now 40 years later we're looking back, whoa, what happened? A lot of people are suffering. And I think I love that story with the Native Americans burying that girl in the hole as well too, because I think we would be well served to do that again, because it would be such a really nourishing way to access vitamin G and get more earth energy and to bring down inflammation so that our body can begin to heal itself.
It grounds out the inflammation.
It's really, really beautiful and really elegant and powerful and free. Like you just can just walk outside.
That's the beauty of it. That's why we call it the most important health discovery ever, because it's free. What you got to do is go outdoors, take your shoes off, and it's not convenient. And these products that we manufactured, these mats, they're not the answer. They're not a treatment. They are a 911 type, temporary thing that we can use until we can figure out how to build our houses better, and put some carbon or conductive materials in our fabrics. They'll still look the same. They just, but they need to be connected to the earth. So when you sit down, you're grounded, or when you walk across the carpet or on a floor, it needs to be earthen material or it needs to be conductive. Because if it's not if, we know, I know that in order to maintain the immune system electrically stable and return it to its normal functioning, healthy functioning, then the body has to have a ground. It has to be grounded. So the new mission is not to, people have to verify everything I've done and get it behind them. But the real opportunity or the real need is that we have to redesign our carpets, redesign our footwear, redesign anything we sleep on, walk on, sit on. We need to restore. We need to have just a little bit of conductivity so electrons can move back and forth in our body to reduce inflammation. And so the opportunity there is everything in the world has to be reinvented. We have to, and it happens in time anyway. Your carpets wear out, your shoes wear out, everything wears out. And then along the way now, the real opportunity is for everybody who manufactures things. We're in the manufacturing, not that we ever wanted to be in the manufacturing. No one would do what we needed to do. We needed a carbon conductive mat that was affordable, that people could afford, and that they could sleep on, and that would last. And a lot of people say, you're nuts. Nobody's going to sleep on that. And I said, well, if they're in pain, they will. and they do. And now there's millions and millions of them being sold around the world. But again, that's just a Band-Aid. These mats are a way to protect you until corporate America or industrial America or people who make things fix their things and come up with new versions that are healthier, especially for our children. We cannot have, autism and all these inflammation-related health disorders that are affecting our children. We can't have it because it's impacting and it's just affecting the health of the family and of the community, and the burden is just too much. So we need to stop it, fix it, and it's going to take time for all this to be. This is an educational movement. That's why every day I'm talking to somebody. I'm on podcast a few times a week, and I'm just sharing everything that we know as much as we can. And other people are sharing it, and that's the way it's going to be.
Absolutely. It's so many people are suffering as a result of something so simple and so accessible, where we've just got to get our feet on the earth. And I see so many kids playing in the park. They've got shoes on. They've even got masks on, a lot of them. And it's so sad to see, because kids should have their bare feet on earth. Adults should too. And it's because of the work that you're doing, where I am seeing more people aware of earthing, aware of the power of being barefoot to access the earth energy, to get more vitamin G and to absorb that and bring down the inflammation. So it's an incredible work that you have done and that you continue to do. And I really do appreciate that. And I'm grateful for the time that you spent chatting with me here on this today. Do you have any final message for everyone listening?
Well, it's, what I try to encourage people to do is, it's kind of hard to believe what I'm telling you is the cause of most of these modern health disorders. And the only way that people can really understand it and accept it is you have to experience it. And fortunately, you don't have to do much except walk outdoors, take your shoes off. And if you're not comfortable, just take a chair and sit down, take your shoes off, put your feet on the grass, in the dirt, and just sit there for 30 minutes, 15 minimum. And what's going to happen is your respiration is going to change. Your blood viscosity is going to change. Your blood is going to thin because now it's negatively charged, and the little red blood cells repel each other so they can get in and out of the capillaries easier and better oxygenate the tissue. So your color is going to improve. Your demeanor is going to change because the pain is going to start to slowly fade away. You're going to feel better. You're going to start smiling instead of being frowned. And it's hard to be mad and upset and angry when you're grounded. It just drains the stress away. And it's kind of like the rabbit and the coyote, it drains that chase away. And but anyhow, in 15 to 30 minutes, you're going to notice something different, that you feel better. You may not be able to describe it, and you may have this pain that got better, and then all of a sudden there's a pain, because you can only remember one pain at a time, but you may have a dozen pains, but this is the biggest one, whatever. But things will start to come down, calm down. And then if it works for you at all, then you need to do it again. Spend a half hour a day, spend an hour a day grounding. And if you really notice results and you really want to get some benefit, then you can try these little products. They're very inexpensive, but you have to get grounded. The most important thing you can do is to ground yourself during sleep, because that's the time when the body heals and restores itself. And you don't want any inflammation in your body while you're sleeping, because that's going to really make things worse. And you can, it's, again, I could talk all day, but really you have to experience earthing is what I'm really trying to say. And whether you do it at the beach or whether you do it anywhere, you feel better after the beach. But you have to pay attention and say, okay, when I stand on the earth, wow, this happens. And it's affecting your health. So you need to experience it. Then you need to find ways to incorporate it into your lifestyle. If it's nothing else, it's just barefoot. A half hour is better than nothing. But sleeping grounded is really important. But grounding is your most natural electrical state. Being grounded throughout all time, from the beginning of time. The first amoeba was grounded because it had a negative charge of the earth on it. All living things, all plants, everything, have always been grounded. Because if we're suffering inflammation throughout evolution and throughout all the time it took us to get, we couldn't be here because everybody would be sick. But anyhow, so inflammation doesn't exist in the wild. Inflammation, to give you an example, animals in the wild don't suffer from inflammation-related health disorder, chronic inflammation. They have damage like oxidative burst like everybody, but they're grounded and it stops there. But animals who live indoors with their owners, 50% of them die from cancer, just like their owners. That doesn't occur in nature. So this is an environmental health disorder. We changed our environment. We lost our ground. We put shoes on. We lost our ground, and so our immune systems are compromised. And but anyhow, your immune system works 24/7. In nature, you would be grounded 24/7. So more ground is better, and any ground is good. More ground is better, but at least stay grounded until your pain goes away. Because if you have pain, you have inflammation, and grounding reduces the inflammation, which is what's messing up your immune system. So pain is a message to your brain that, hey, I'm on fire, get me out of here. So it's just really experiential, and then you'll get it. And then if you want more information, you can go to theearthinginstitute.net. They have all the studies are published there, thousands of stories, and people, Google earthing and any disease, Google, inflammation and your health disorder, and you can find these things. And then we have all those studies. So there's lots of information now, but it's a personal thing. Everybody's a little bit different. Everybody's health is a little bit different depending on how you live, your environment and all these things. So, but again, bottom line is, this is you can do your own study. We spent over $20 million on a study, but you can do your own and it's free. Just walk outdoors and notice the color of your skin changing, notice your respiration changing, notice your energy coming up, your pain going down, and just you're healthier and happier. That's all I can say. I keep talking, but I've said enough. So.
Well said. Really, really beautiful words, and I'll echo that. everything that you've said. The immune system is an electrical system, earthing and grounding. It's a foundation of our health,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
we must get back to that.
Yep.
Clint Ober, I really appreciate the time that you spent speaking with me today. It was a real delight hearing everything that you had to share, and I appreciate you coming on and doing all this work. It's really powerful stuff, and yeah, thank you.
Same here. Thanks for having me. And if you ever have a question, give me a holler.
Will do. Thank you.
All right. You bet. Take care.